Before I go into time, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. My name is Terrence Mack. I'm a senior political science major here at the illustrious Clark Atlanta University, home of the proud and prestigious Panthers. And this is our first debate for Meeting of the Minds, Atlanta University Senate Debate Team. And we are arguing today that police have too much power. And I am honored to argue the affirmative with my partner today, Sabrine Jolly, and against my lovely opponents. I'm sure they'll give us a great clash today. And I also like to thank our adjudicators for being here as well. And I'm going to go straight into the debate by stating definitions, so that throughout this debate we're not arguing over what does too much mean, what does power mean, what does police mean. By police, we are talking of public servants. We're talking about the constitutional bodies of powers empowered by the state to enforce the law, protect property, and limit civil disorder. And it's important to remember those three points. And we are arguing that too much means excessive and unnecessary. And by power, we mean authority and rights. Now let's get into our 4 reasons why police have too much power. For one, they have too much power under the law. The same law that was designed for us to all be equally protected under has, over the years, grown into a system designed to give police officers, or those public servants in law enforcement, more powers over the common citizen. For instance, there's under U.S. law, police have the right to detain you at will, and cause to believe, if they have a cause to believe that a crime has been committed, or if the officer has a reasonable suspicion that that person has been or is about to engage in a criminal activity. And when it comes to determining what is suspicion, and that's their right. There is no board to decide at that moment whether this person is suspicious or not. That burden is left up to the police officer. So in that case, police have way too much power. That you can have an individual on his way to a job that can save him from poverty, and the police officer can just look at him and say, "You look suspicious," and then take him in and detain him without no questions asked. And therefore, he just lost his job. Therefore, he just lost his opportunity to rise above the poverty line. Evidence 2, the confidential records program, which was designed 30 years ago as a means to protect the officer from criminals finding out about the addresses of which they live, so they protect their families, which is pretty much understandable. But today, it's being abused. It's the fact that they don't have their certain records inside the files. It prevents them from having to pay toll tickets, having to pay speeding tickets, and other misbehavior police conducts in which they are abusing their powers of. Number three of this contention would be that they have the right to protect themselves from the law, but we do not have the right to protect ourselves from them. I was reading an article that stated if a police officer does not have a right to just bust in your house and aim a gun at your face, but if he does, you don't have the right to shoot him or her. And in that case, I say for the fact that they may not have the right to assault you, but you don't have the right to assault them back, and then that's assaulting an officer. So in that case, police do have too much power under that law. Contention number 2, we're talking more so about the inner police culture, professional courtesy, a blue code of silence, if you will, amongst police officers, where one police officer says pretty much, I will not snitch on you if you do not snitch on me about me getting away with the speeding ticket, or about what I just did with this suspect's drugs, or anything of that particular nature. And because of this blue code of silence, which sounds very, very so much similar to street gangs and the same no snitch policy that they have, that has been also successful inside of their lives apparently, have been carrying out, and it's allowed fellow officers to speed without tickets, allow fellow officers to drive drunk. In other words, if they don't snitch, they can get away with any pretty much misbehavior issue that they want to if they're ever to encounter another police officer. Reason number 3, police militarization. And this was seeded more so in the Reagan era, when he declared a war on drugs. And he started putting in programs such as the 133 program that authorized the Pentagon to provide military equipment to the police officers. And there was no standards required, there was no training guidelines. They just gave this military equipment to them and said, yes, do what you must do to get rid of these drugs out of the community. And now they use these excessive military force to carry out simple things such as drug raids. So apparently now you need heavy artillery such as rifles and and flash grenades and things of that sort to bust into a project and just take everyone's drugs without any questions asked. And for instance, there was actually an incident on May 6, 2010, when Ayanna Stanley Jones was a 7-year-old girl sleeping on a couch. And there was a murderer who lived with that little girl. And the police officer decided to take SWAT, to call in the SWAT to go get this simple murderer, who, by the way, was unarmed by the time he found him. And he decided to use excessive force to bust into this house, shoot just about the grandmother. The grandmother was inflicted with a wound. The little girl was shot and she was killed. And then by the time, and these were only people on the first floor. The murderer was upstairs on the second floor. So they didn't bust in, ask questions, they just bust in and started shooting. And this is why you do not get military equipment to local law enforcement. It's not needed. And contention number 4, I would say police do not receive just consequences for their actions. As we've seen, in 2006, Sean Bell, him and his friend coming from a bachelor party, and they were suspected of doing a crime that they clearly did not do. Did the officer ask any questions before he shot? No, they shot 6 times in them in a parked vehicle, unarmed. What were the consequences? The officers forced into retirement, receiving over $40,000 annually. And then there was even a case of Eric Garner, most recently, where he was an individual who was being detained into arrest, and he died of a chokehold. And both officers kept their job, and only consequences was being stripped of weapons of a period of time. And there's more consequences and there's more stories. But all this is to say that police have way too much power under the law. They have way too much power because of their excessive use of military equipment, and they have way too much power because of they do not receive the proper consequences of their actions. Thank you, and I see my time.
Next, we will have the negative side. Hello, everyone. Members of the Peanut Gallery, our most honored and distinguished guests, adjudicators, my lovely partner here, and the Affirmative for providing a lovely case, one in which I intend to fully negate. And then not only will I do that, but I will present an off case as well. So without any further ado, again, my name is Cassandra Waters, history major here at the illustrious Clark-Atlanta University. So I'll give you a quick roadmap. I'm going to go into some preliminaries of debate first, the basic structures, and then I'm going to address those issues in which the affirmative failed to address. And then I'm going to go on case. I'm going to address his case, and I'm going to go off case. I'll give you mine, okay? Some of the preliminaries that the affirmative failed to mention, right? Thank you so much. We are succeeding to all of your definitions. But the affirmative failed to give a weighing mechanism for this round. See, for those who do not know, a weighing mechanism is the parameters in which the debate should be judged. So we don't know what we're judging here if we don't give a weighing mechanism. We could be judging on morality. Well, what's moral? Do they have too much power? I don't think that's right. Or we could say abundance of evidence. Which side has more evidence, can provide more evidence for the case, and that's how you should judge who wins. So today we're going to use a weighing mechanism of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is what is the good for the most of the population of society. All right, so we go on with the weighing mechanism of utilitarianism, and I'm going to go ahead to the affirmative's case. I'm going to negate some of his all of his contentions. Contention number 1 had his rights over his citizens and their ability to judge what is suspicious behavior. Suspicious behavior, first of all, these are our officers. These are the people who walk our streets, protect us from those common criminals and murders that you spoke of, right? Suspicious behavior is a part of their duties and jobs, right? So if nobody was suspicious, then nobody could be arrested or nobody could be questioned or detained. So suspicion comes with the job, sir. I'm sorry to negate that, but then your subpoint B stated that the confidential records of use. Confidential records of use, sir? Like, there are proper repercussions for illegally obtaining information. Alright, so if you illegally obtain some information, it can completely be thrown out in court. Your subpoint C was the right to protect us from the law, but we can't protect us from them. Now, which is simply not true, because once an officer outsteps his boundaries, in which the parameters in which he had come to do. Now, this is why I think the whole time that the civilian's intellect is being undercut, right? A civilian knows when a cop is trying to, or let's say a person is in their house trying to undermine them or assault them or hurt them. A person that knows their rights and are educated about the law know what a police officer can and cannot do and know what is allowed of them. So, of course, maybe not you, if you're being detained in your own home, yeah, who's to say what you feel you're offended by? It's your own home. You know, you're going to be offended by it, you're going to be offended by them knocking on your door hard. This is the people already are. So this is the job and duties of the men who put their lives on the line for us, everyday citizens. And just because someone has an attitude with the way they kicked in their door and you decide to assault an officer, it's not reason enough, not grounds for what a person is already in a person's job description. Your contention too was snitching and the blue code. What do you call it? Blue code of silence. If I don't snitch on you and you won't snitch on me, that sounds like street talk to me. Those are unofficial laws. What kind of power does the one really have? Authority does one really have in the streets, right? I have here a paper by a few scholars of psychology, which says that power is a sense of, authority comes from, the diction between authority and power is not clear for one to have. Motives and fear may be the motivation of one's actions or actions, basically. So, if one is fearing for their life by a police officer, now this is mental right now. We're getting into the psychology of things. This is talking about mental power, and as power, he stated as authority, which is one that oversees the organization to maintain its functions. Power is, if you talk about it in a sense of influence, this unofficial blue code laws is merely influence. Now, we got to go back to the citizens having their own intellect. Now, does a person have a choice to whether they can tell whether a police officer done something illegal or not? That's their own choice. So, I mean, that contention is falsely good on its own. I'm going to go ahead to your contention number 3, the war on drugs.
So we have a rebuttal?
Oh, no, he has a question. I will get to your question before I get to my own case. The war on drugs. This war on drugs, he said the police officer, he gave this big elaborate story in which he thought that a police officer had too much power. But when clearly he said that the little girl was living in a home with a murderer in the house, and they had to use excessive force. Now, if I don't know about the rest of you guys, if there's a murder in my house, I give anyone, every person with a bag or a gun to use excessive force. If there's a murderer or a crime committer or a criminal and a personal home of someone and they are unwelcome and they use excessive force, they were perfectly justified. I'm going to go ahead into my own case, but before I do that, I'm going to take your question.
Yeah, I have 2 questions now. The first question is, isn't the fact that the blue code of silence, as I stated, is an unofficial law, is proof to the fact that police do have too much power? The fact that it's an unofficial law, yet it's still happening, since you already stated that it does happen?
Alright, it does happen, and it's an unofficial law, so it doesn't mean that that their organization gave them authority to tell people that they shouldn't tell or they wouldn't tell. It's up to the civilians to make their own decisions. Since I'm under protected time, I'm gonna go ahead and go to my own case. I'm gonna get through this as fast as I can because I'm under protected time. But my first contention, my partner will get to that. But before we do, I urge a vote for the negative.
University, mass media arts major, concentration in public relations, and a minor in English, and I am serving as your member of government. I would like to thank the adjudicators, the opposition, and the lovely Prime Minister. I'm arguing the affirmative that police do have too much power. I would start off by negating the opposition's contentions. However, they didn't list any, so I would first like to go into our first contention, which is police have too much power under the law, which leads me to ask the question, what's being exercised? Is it power or authority? And out of those two, the only thing that is granted by the Constitution to the police is authority. And power, and I'm going to extend the Prime Minister's definition of power, which was authority and rights, but the ability to control people or things. Nowhere is it constitutional to control people. The police's job and duty is to serve and protect, and authority is the right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. That is their jurisdiction. That is where they should remain. However, lately they have been exercising power and giving it the title of authority. And an elocutionist once wrote that has a lot to do with this, that it is not the creature of an hour, the sudden outburst of an uncontrolled fury, or the unspeakable brutality of an insane mob. It represents the cool, calculating deliberation of intelligent people who openly avow that there is an unwritten law, aka the blue code of silence, that justifies them in putting human beings to death without complaint under oath, without trial by injury, and without opportunity to make defense, which leads me to giving some of the things that is granted to the police by the Constitution. And it says, in United States constitutional law, police power is the capacity of the states to regulate behavior and enforce, I will get to your question as soon as I'm through my contention, and enforce order within their territory. And for the betterment of health, safety, morals, and general welfare of their inhabitants. And it says within their territory. There's a story about, it was in Rochester, New York, police who was speeding to S. Winston Road, which was outside of his territory, to pick up a woman. And when a spectator on the outside recorded it and gave it to a local police, guess what the consequence was? Nothing. Three things wrong with that situation is, first of all, they were outside of their jurisdiction. Second of all, they were speeding for no apparent reason and there was no consequence. And also misuse of taxpayers' resources. And there was another story about John Coughlin. He got a speeding ticket for rushing his wife in labor to the hospital. He called the police to let the police know that he wasn't running from him, so the police got in front of him, escorted him to the hospital, and as soon as his wife got out of labor, the police was sitting in the lobby and handed him a ticket. His consequence was a ticket versus he was rushing his wife, a pregnant woman about to give labor to the hospital, and he gets a ticket. However, this other police is doing 80 miles on a 60, and he gets no consequence to go pick up his boo. Which leads me, and I would like to reiterate the fourth contention, which is police do not receive just consequences for their actions. I'm pretty sure many of you have heard of Rodney King. And on March 3rd, 1991, he was with two people, Morgan Allen and Freddie Helms. Now, I'm not going to go into the story in its entirety. However, Rodney King was speeding. He was drunk. But to make a long story short, the police told him to get out the car, and him and his friends to get out the car, put his head down on the ground, and eventually the police start beating him. For what? And if I can explain to you, Rodney King's face was swollen, had cuts and wounds. How does speeding result in a detriment? This man was near death, And on top of that, three of the four officers were acquitted, meaning they didn't have any charges. They got away with beating all three men, threatening them. Threatening, you can go to jail for threatening. But nothing happened. All three of these men were acquitted, and one of the officers was acquitted on one charge, which was use of deadly weapon. You mean to tell me that you're not going to jail for using a baton against me? I have done nothing to you, not to mention that all three of these men were unarmed. Another story that explains why police do not receive just consequences for their actions was an incident that happened in South Carolina with the state patrol. It was a guy who was at the gas station. The police came alongside him, told him to get out the car. He got out the car. The police said, he asked, what did I do wrong? The police told him to get his license and registration. He said, I'm going to get my license and registration. He reached over to get it, and the police shot him 4 times.
We have a question.
I'll take your question. You said that he didn't get a consequence, but it's true that that police officer actually is facing jail time for 2 felony charges for that, and he got fired. What do you have to say about that?
That was after the fact. This happened, you can probably say years after the fact. I'm saying the initial consequence of this resulted in acquittal. He got acquitted for beating a person brutally. This person could have lost their life. Do you know how important life is? And because he gets away years down the line when it doesn't even matter, because Rodney King died in 2012. It doesn't even matter at this point, he's dead. Okay. Next. During the civil rights, I'm pretty sure you are familiar with the right of assembly, which is granting individual right to come together and collectively express, promote, pursue, and defend common interests. You know, when Martin Luther King and many other great leaders would petition, or they would go out and assemble for their common interests, they were German shepherds were let out on them. They were hosed down. Some of them were killed for something that's clearly stated in that's granted to us in the Constitution. So I strongly urge that you guys vote the affirmative in today's debate, and I succeed my time.
My name is Sarah Smith. I'm a political science major at the illustrious Clark Atlanta University. I'm just going to go straight down their case. Actually, first I want to bring up my contentions, and then I'm going to go straight down their case. All right, are y'all ready? Okay, starting with our contention 1, checks and balances. Police have checks and balances in the current day society. There are 3 things that they have to do. First is a paperwork process after every single homicide that happens in society that they work in. So first they have to go through that process. B, they have a due process. After they get done filling out their paperwork, people go through, make sure that what they did was justified, and see the Supreme Court. After they see if it was justified, if people still have a problem with it, it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually decides if it was a problem. Our contention 2 is the social contract theory. When we're talking about the social contract, we say that Americans give certain liberties in exchange for the government's protection. If we, by saying the police have too much power, you're actually saying that by being American, as soon as you're born and you get a birth certificate and you get a social security number, you're signing a contract essentially with the government saying that I'm going to give up these certain liberties for your protection. The police give you that protection. The military gives you that protection. So with the social contract theory, you're saying that the police are the governing factor. They have to help you. They have to serve you. They have to protect you. If you don't get that protection, then you have the right to overthrow your government. That's what's in the Constitution. Contention 3, police states and police without powers. What you have to see is that, actually I can get to that later, but because they actually talked about militarization, but contention 3 is police states and police without power. What would happen in the United States if police had any less power than what they have now? What you have to see is that if we reduce the police's power by any means, that we will see either 1, anarchy, or 2, that will be ineffective. We see now that people are already disobeying the laws with the amount of power that the police have now. If the police had any less power, then they would be ineffective more than what they already are. Now let's go down the affirmatives case. First we gave, we went against their contention one, which is equal protection and a power system, a condom system. When we said suspicious behavior is good, and we said the suspicious behavior is good, and that we need, that the police need to, look at people with suspicious behavior and pull them over, check them, because obviously they might be breaking the law. And that's essential in today's case, because they basically said that police shouldn't be able to do that. But that's exactly what the police need to do to keep us safe. So they say that power or authority and that they are being excessive. What you have to see is that everything that you see in the media is not true. Everything that you see in the media is about, actually, I have something from Medvid in 2014, actually from a couple weeks ago, that said that you only see what's in the media, and it's usually only, okay, here it is. Local police versus accelerated improvements in public safety. The number of annual police killings from 2005 to 2012 remains stable at about 400. Nearly all tragic, well-publicized incidents of young black males dying at the hands of white cops occur when officers are isolated and vulnerable. Less than a quarter of all police uses deadly force involved white officers firing at black suspects. So what you have to see is that over 75% of incidents that happen with the police, so that's over 300 people that died from the police or that got shot by the police, weren't even black, and it wasn't even a white officer. So you have to extend that fact that police aren't using excessive force all the time. If only 400 people are dying each year, when over, I think I read in an article that it's over 62 million run-ins with the police every year. You want to go ahead and answer your question?
So your definition of excessive power is if someone dies, that's your measure of whether they use excessive power or not?
No, what I'm saying is excessive power is like specifically what I read is deadly force. Deadly force isn't always if somebody dies. It's if the police are using deadly force, or if something could happen from the person, if a person could die. It's not necessarily that person did die. May I move on, or do you have to follow on? All right, moving on. First of all, we had two more arguments against our contention, one, their B and their C, and she never says anything about our responses. You have to flow that to the negative side, because silence is compliance in a debate round. If you don't say anything about what we said, then you have to flow that to the negative side. Secondly, she brings up all these things about when the police don't get consequences, and then she brings up the South Carolina shooting and said that it happens years later that the police actually got something else. Actually, that happened last week, and the police officer got fired that same day. That police officer is now facing two felony charges. She's bringing up all, and like I said before, everything that you see in the media is actually just making the police seem like they're worse than what they really are.
I have a question.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Are you referring to the Rodney King incident?
No, I'm referring to the South Carolina incident that you're talking about. But talking about Rodney King, one that happened 20 years ago, and secondly, yeah, that's abuse of power. Yeah, that's abuse of power, but that doesn't mean that the police have too much power. Just because that happens, that doesn't necessarily mean that the police have too much power. It means that one, they abuse the power that they have, and secondly, that they get the benefit of the doubt, because that always happens. But that's going to happen in any society, and it's not about power, it's about perception.
Another question?
Go ahead and ask your question.
Is that not, you just stated that does not prove that they do not have too much power when they use that excessive amount of force, but if they use that excessive amount of force and don't get the just consequence for it, is that not using too much power?
No, that's not them having too much power, that's them having the benefit of the doubt, because the law is always going to be on the police's hands regardless, and as the affirmative team, you have to say to a certain extent that you want to reduce the police's power. So if you're going to reduce their power, how are you going to, one, how are you going to reduce any of the power that they already have? And secondly, when you do reduce the power, are they still going to be effective? Next, I'm going to go to the contention 3. We talked about the little girl in the house that was getting murdered, and she says that it's important and that's about human life to that. But I have 3 points to go against this. First, our weighing mechanism is utilitarianism. With utilitarianism, you see that it's the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people. If we are getting a murderer out of the streets and one less person dies because that person is off the streets, then you have to vote for the negative team because more people are being helped than are being harmed. I have a minute left, so let me just... Oh, they also talk about authority and how police are supposed to have authority and not power, but power and authority go hand in hand. You can't have authority without having power. Next, let's go to the Constitution.
You have another question?
No, I can't answer this right now. I'm down. Alright, now we're talking about 10 seconds. Talking about the Constitution. The Constitution was made before the police even came into America. It was made about 100 years before we even had a stable police force. So you have to look at that. The Constitution wasn't even made for a police. I'm so confused about what that means. This time? Okay, thank you, my
Okay. Hello, Peanut Gallery again. I want to thank everyone else for everyone who showed up today. I want to give you a warm, hearty welcome. And thank you from Meeting of the Minds. Thank you, adjudicators, for being here, taking time out of your busy schedules. My Affirmative for providing great class, my lovely partner. And now this is the part of the debate where basically I give some voters, right? My voters are basic concept reasons on why you should vote for the negative. And without any further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and get down the list. My voter number one, our weighing mechanism. I want you to really take into account this weighing mechanism of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people. And taking account that our police force, that task force that is sent to protect our citizens, protect our borders, protect us as we carry on our everyday lives and our pursuit of freedom, our pursuit of happiness. I want you to take into account that these people protect our safety, our well-being, and protect us from those criminals, those murderers, that want to do us harm. So they're protecting us from the larger harm by using some kind of force or authority. So voter number one, utilitarianism. Voter number two, okay, I'm gonna go and say voter number two, power versus authority. Right? Power versus authority. Yes, it's undeniable that our police have authority, but whether they not, the kind of power that the Affirmative tried to explain, that whether it's excessive force or not, or deadly force or not, he said it's influencing to someone else, and that shouldn't be so. But I have to beg you and take into consideration that each citizen of ours have our own intellect and our own moral compass that we go by. So our power over someone else's power over us is our own choice. It's the ability to influence us is our own choice. So our authority is undeniable. Our power, the power they have over us may weigh in and out, right? So it's based on the individual. So voter number one, utilitarianism. Voter number two, power versus authority. And voter number three, I'm going to have to say lack of a case. Now, whether or not their place was clear, in their case they stated something about blue codes and unofficial walls and things that they don't, powers that the police don't even have, things that may vary from person to person. Now this is an absurd argument, and their contention number two should be completely dropped. But all of our contention should flow. So my contention number four should just be flow. Flow of all of our contention of the negatives contentions. Contention number one being of social contract, checks and balances. Contention number two being of social contract theory, and contention number three is if police have any less power, they'll be detrimental effects to our society. Right. So I gave you 4 voters to vote on, adjudicators, and I hope those are enough to urge a vote for the negative.
Everybody for coming down to today's debate. Means a lot to us all. I'd like to thank our adjudicators for taking the time out to judge today's debate. Not for you, not for our opponents for being here, giving us some great class. my partner, Sabrina Jolly. And before I go into this, I'd like to state that I'm going to give you a numerous amount of voters to prove as to why we won today's debate and why this entire debate they have been agreeing with us. Voter number one, utilitarianism. Yes, so they brought up the Wayne mechanism that today we should debate the fact that police having too much power, that police having what is basically best for the people. And we argue that we've been arguing this entire time, whether the Wayne mechanism was stated in the first speech or not, that police having way too much power is not in the best interest of the people. And the entire time they've been arguing the fact that it's in the law and that it's in the Constitution, but we're arguing that it abuses the power of what is in the law. Just because it's in the law doesn't mean it's always applied. And and they also stated that they also went back and forth about the fact of excessive. We talked about excessive power. Today, vote number two is the fact that we are arguing today about whether police abuse their power or not. Which our second speaker and first speaker first got up here and agreed with me and agreed with me and my partner the fact that yes, they do exceed their powers, but it's in the law that you can protect yourself from them. But that's not what we're arguing today. We're arguing whether they exceed their powers or not. I gladly thank them for agreeing with us. And I'd also like to go into the fact that they mentioned their three contentions real late. So for the fact that in parliamentary debate you cannot negate their contentions within your rebuttal speech. So I believe that's really unfair. But I believe that me and my partner already negated them without even having to hear their contentions. For the main fact that their three contentions were all synonymous. All their three contentions were saying was that it's in the law for you to protect yourself, but sometimes police officers abuse their powers. That's what we're arguing. We're not arguing all police officers abuse their powers. We're arguing that it happens. And the fact that it happens means that it is not in the best interest of the people. Utilitarianism, as they wanted to debate on it. We've already expressed how police officers have used excessive force in the fact of police militarization when they went into that young girl's house and she went to that young girl's house and they shot multiple people and they even killed a little girl who wasn't even awake. And those weren't even the targets they were going after. All they had to do was go upstairs and arrest the individual who murdered the person 3 hours ago. That's it. And then they put the burden on the family saying that, oh, they shouldn't have been housed with a murderer. How do I know this person's a murderer? I mean, you don't walk through the door and ask them, hey, you killed anybody today? No! And going more into the fact, I I'd like you to remember these names: Sean Bell, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Troy Davis, John Crawford. I'd like you to remember these.
The affirmative is bringing up names and cases that were not mentioned in the 4 case, therefore should be thrown out and not considered by the adjudicators. That's just one of taking into consideration of the adjudicators, and you can continue.
All right. If my opponent was listening to my first speech, I did mention cases in which the police do not receive just consequences for their actions, and I did bring up those names. But just because she did not hear us, we stated Troy Davis, we stated Eric Garner, we stated Michael Brown, we stated John Crawford, and Sean Bell and Darian Hunt. All these names are individuals who were unarmed, who were minding their business, who were shot down unlawfully. And the individuals who did so did not receive just consequences. They did not receive any jail time. Some of them even kept their jobs, or they received retirement with benefits. That is way too much power, and it is not in the best interest of the citizens as they wanted to debate in today's debate, which is utilitarianism. So therefore, I see my time, and I strongly urge